In this video, I'm unlocking 3 awesome ways to master the Sense Divine Shakey Worm. This soft plastic worm is a powerhouse in worm fishing. I've got 3 killer techniques that will help you land more fish, from the subtle shaky head to the unique action of a jika rig to the very popular neko rig. Get ready to discover how to make the most out of this incredible bait. The Sense Divine Shakey Worm's been out on the market for a while. They got a ton of different colors and multiple sizes to get you covered for whatever situation you're faced with, and all these techniques can be used no matter what size shaky worm you're using. So the first technique that we're going to talk about with the Divine Shakey Worm is the shaky head. So as you can see right here, I got it rigged up on the Sense Divine Shakey Head, and this is the shaky head I like to use when I'm using casting equipment. So I like using this shaky head in particular when I'm using casting equipment because it's got a thicker diameter hook and a longer shank hook, and it just allows me to be able to yank on it a little bit harder than some of those more finesse style shaky heads. The shaky heads that I'm going to be using when I'm using my finesse techniques like a spinning rod and lighter line, I'm going to be making those myself using my do-it molds. A couple of my favorite shaky heads is the shaky head with screw lock, and then also the Randy Howell shaky head as well. One of the reasons why I like making my own shaky heads, whether it's the Randy Howell or the one with the screw lock, is I like to be able to put the specific hook that I want in there. Victory makes a couple great hooks that match up perfectly with those molds. Those hooks are super sharp. I like that lighter wire, and then I can put that specific size hook in there that matches up with my bait, so I get the maximum action out of that Divine Shakey Worm. And one thing that you can also do is cut down this Divine Shakey Worm to match specifically what you're wanting to do. This Shakey Worm is 6.3 inches, so it's a bigger size worm. It's not like a giant 10-inch worm or anything like that, but it is a larger worm. It's not a little finesse tiny little worm. However, you can cut it down to match whatever you're wanting to do. So for example, with this Shakey Worm right here, if I want to cut it down, I can make it smaller and make that presentation smaller and make things a little bit more finesse. So this shaky head right here is the Shake It jig with screw lock I make with the do-it mold. I like this shaky head a lot. A lot of people shy away from the shaky heads when they have the screw locks for some reason, and I don't think that that's necessary. I like to make just a tiny little modification to my shaky heads with screw locks in order to eliminate any hookup issues that you may have. All you have to do in order to do that is take a pair of diagonal cutters just like this, and you're just going to cut off a majority of that screw lock, so you leave 1 or 2 of the loops. That way you're still able to screw in your worm, and then it's not going to have a lot of bite, so that way when that fish bites, it's going to pop that worm off that screw lock and you have no issues getting the hook in the fish. So most of the time when I'm fishing a shaky head on a casting rod, I'm going to be using the 7.2 medium action from 6 Sense in the sensory model. This rod is super light and super sensitive, and it's great when I want to go to like 10-pound test and still have that larger gap right here, have that larger hook, stronger hook, and be able to cast it on casting equipment. This is the 3/8 ounce shaky head. It's got a big hook in there. I can throw a 1/4 ounce on this as well, but anytime I start getting to a 1/4 ounce and lighter, that's when I'm going to a lot of times switch over to my finesse setup, my spinning rods, my spinning reel. So when I'm using those, I like to use the Lux rod. I have it on a wacky rig right now, which is what we're going to talk about shortly. But a lot of times I'm using this 6 Sense Lux model with a braid to fluorocarbon leader. I can pair up that leader however I want in order to take into consider cover, water clarity, stuff like that. So right now it's got 8-pound test, and that's typically what I'm going to start off with. If I can get away with it, I might go up to 10-pound even on that finesse equipment, but the braid to fluoro is key. That braid just helps everything be a lot more sensitive. So the next technique that we're going to talk about with this 6 Sense Divine Shakey Worm is putting that worm on a jika rig. If you don't know what the jika rig, it's going to look a little familiar to a free rig, but it is different and it does act different. So what this is it's similar to a free rig in the style weight that you're going to be using. However, there's a soldered ring on this hook eye that's connected to a split ring, and then I open up that split ring and then put the free rig weight onto that split ring. So it gives you this kind of a look right here that is very unique and different than a lot of different looks and techniques that they have out on the market right now. So when you're fishing this jika rig, this weight isn't sliding up and down the line. It's fixed in place. So when it's falling in the water, it's going to come down just like this. So everything's going to be straight. It's going to go in and out of cover really, really well. This jika rig, especially around brush, which is like I'm fishing right now, comes through better than anything else. I think it comes through the brush even better than a Texas rig, even with that weight peg. When you rig up this Divine Shakey Worm on this hook, I like a 3/0 or a 4/0 for the 6 Sense Shakey Worm. You're going to just fish it like you would any other, or rig it just like you would any other Texas rig worm. And I like to expose it so that hook point is nice and covered up. Now, when it comes to the jika rig setup, I'm either going to be using the same sensory rod that I use for the Shaky Head, or I'm going to be using what I have it on right now is the 7.3 medium heavy unicorn rod from 6 Sense. This rod is super sensitive and very lightweight, just like the sensory, but it's got a little bit more backbone to it than the sensory does because this is a medium heavy and that sensory is a medium action. I got 12-pound test because I'm fishing around some of that brush and I want just a little bit heavier line than that 10. You could go up heavier if you need to, but this is super clear water here, so that 12 goes a long way. So now we're getting into the third and final way that I like to rig this 6 Sense Divine Shakey Worm. And it's gonna be on a neko rig. So a neko rig is similar to a wacky rig. However, you're putting a nail weight into the head of that worm. So you can see that nail weight sticking out right here. So typically when I'm fishing the neko rig, I'm going to be using a 1/32 to a 3/32 ounce weight. Most of the time I'm going with that 3/32 because it just gets down a little bit easier. You can feel things a little bit easier. There are times where guys are going to be fishing heavier ones. I know at Lake Shasta it's popular to throw up to a 3/16 ounce nail weight because they're fishing super deep water. But most of the time, like I said, I'm using that 3/32. Now when it comes to the terminal tackle outside of that nail weight, I like to use the Owner Sniper Finesse hook. I like to use the weedless one because if I get into a place where I don't need to use the weedless one, I can always cut off those weed guards. So now because you're hooking this bait in the middle, it's going to give it a unique presentation than any of the other worms that you're going to be throwing. When it gets on the bottom with that neko rig, it's going to be falling down just like this. And then as it's hitting the bottom, you're going to have all that movement out of your tail portion of the worm. What I like to do is I like to hook it offset. So this is actually longer than the side with the weight. It's not even in the middle. It's a little bit off to one side, and I like to go off to one side on the actual head side of the worm. Now in this tutorial, I have it hooked kind of right through the plastic. There are O-rings and some different types of banding that you can put onto your worms, and a lot of times that's going to help you get better hookups, and it's also going to help you not go through so many worms, because a lot of times when you're fishing a bait like this, you're only getting one fish out of it because you end up tearing this bait when that fish is biting or when that fish is fighting you back to the boat. So a lot of times using those O-rings and some of those bands really help you get more use out of one worm. I'm going to provide some links down in the description of the video so you can go check out some of those O-rings and some of those bands and some of the tools that are going to help you put on those O-rings and bands onto your worms. And now when it comes to my setup for this neko rig, I'm going with the 6 Sense Lux rod and a spinning reel. I like the braid to the fluorocarbon leader. A lot of times I'm going with 8 or 10 pound tests when I'm throwing this neko rig. Like I said, I like having that 3/32 ounce in most situations. However, you want to take into account fall rate and depth that you're fishing. The lighter the weight, the slower the fall. The heavier the weight, the faster the fall. So if you're fishing super deep water, you're going to have a pretty heavy weight in there. If you're fishing super shallow or you need a very, very slow fall, then you're definitely going to want to go with a lighter weight. There's plenty of ways that you can fish the 6 Sense Divine Shakey Worm. These three that I've been talking about right now are not the only ways. Carolina rig's a great option, and Texas rigging is a great option as well. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite way to fish the Divine Shakey Worm is, so that way we can get a conversation going down there, and maybe we'll all learn a little bit more about the 6 Sense Divine Shakey Worm. If you go over to the 6 Sense website to buy anything that we talked about in today's video, make sure to save yourself some money and use my discount code. It's Luna10. It'll save you 10% off everything on the 6 Sense website other than their subscription sack that comes to you every single month. So whether you want to get some of these worms, some of the terminal tackle, a rod, whatever, make sure to use that discount code Luna10. Another great 6 Sense bait is the 6 Sense Juggle Minnow. I've been catching a ton of fish on that as well. And if you want to watch a video very similar to this, where I'm talking about some of my favorite ways to fish the 6 Sense Juggle Minnow, make sure to click on the video that's on the screen right now, and I will see you guys in the next video.